There is a kind of silence that only exists at 30,000 feet. Not the silence of peace or rest, but the silence of a woman sitting alone in a window seat somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, watching the clouds break apart beneath her, thinking about the life she left behind and the life she is about to return to, and feeling, somewhere deep in the part of her that has always known things before she was ready to name them, that something on the other side of that landing is not what she thinks it is. That is where this story begins. Not in a courtroom, not in a lawyer's office, not in the moment of confrontation that everybody remembers when they hear this story. It begins in the air, somewhere between the life Diana had built 6,000 miles from home and the truth that was waiting for her in the house she had paid for with 3 years of her own blood, sacrifice, and silence. She did not know yet what she was flying toward, but she knew enough to go. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Diana Mercer was 38 years old, a registered nurse from Charlotte, North Carolina, and one of the most quietly disciplined people you will ever hear about in a story like this. She was not the kind of woman who made noise about her sacrifices. She was not the kind of woman who needed applause for her dedication or sympathy for her long hours. She was the kind of woman who made a plan, put her head down, and worked that plan with a precision and a patience that most people reserve for things they truly believe in. And Diana Mercer believed in her family. She believed in her marriage. She believed in the blueprint, which is what she and her husband called the 5-year financial plan they had built together on the front porch of their colonial home in a quiet Charlotte suburb on a late spring evening 3 years before any of this happened. She believed in all of it the way you only believe in something when you have poured your actual life into it. When the belief is not an idea, but a lived, daily, costly act of faith. And that faith, it turned out, had been used against her in ways that would take a forensic accountant, a family law attorney, and a very long Thursday night in November to fully untangle. To understand what Diana came home to, you have to understand what she came from, and you have to understand the woman she was before she ever boarded that first flight to London. Diana grew up in Charlotte in a modest household that taught her early that nothing worth having comes without work. Her mother was a medical administrator, organized and steady, the kind of woman who kept the household running with a quiet efficiency that Diana would later recognize in herself. Her father drove long-haul trucks and came home every 2 weeks smelling of highway coffee and road exhaustion. And Diana remembered watching him walk through the door and feeling the whole house exhale. She was a child who paid attention. She color-coded her school notebooks. She made lists at age 12 of everything she wanted to accomplish before she turned 30. She took notes in church, not because anyone told her to, but because she understood, even then, that the world rewards people who keep records. Nursing was never just a career to Diana. It was a calling she had identified at age 9, sitting in a hospital room beside her grandmother, watching the nurses move through that space with a quiet authority that made even grief feel manageable. There was something in the way they worked, purposeful and calm, present without being intrusive, competent in a way that was also kind, that told 9-year-old Diana exactly what she wanted to be. She held on to that image for years. She put herself through nursing school, graduated in the top 15% of her class, and started working at a hospital in Charlotte where she met, in the break room on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a man who would become the center of her world and later the architect of its dismantling. His name was Marcus, and from the very first conversation, he was exactly the kind of man that a careful, list-making, color-coding woman is completely unprepared for. Marcus Whitfield was 30 years old when Diana met him. He worked in logistics management and was slowly building a freight consulting business on evenings and weekends. He was loud in the way that feels like warmth rather than noise. He remembered your coffee order after meeting you once. He laughed from somewhere deep and genuine, the kind of laugh that makes strangers look up from their phones in coffee shops, not because it is disruptive, but because it sounds like something real in a world full of performance. He had a gift for making every person in a room feel like the most important one in it. Diana, who had spent her whole life being careful and measured and precise, found herself completely undone by someone who moved through the world like none of it required effort. They dated for 2 years. They were engaged for 1. They married on a Saturday in October with 43 guests, a playlist Diana had curated over 6 months, and a reading at the ceremony delivered by a woman named Vanessa Cole, who had been Diana's closest friend since they were 19 years old, and the housing office at their university had paired them as roommates by what both women would call, for years afterward, the best accidental decision any administrator ever made. Vanessa Cole is one of the central figures in this story, and you need to understand who she was before you can understand what she became. Because what she became is not who she started out being, and the distance between those two versions of Vanessa is where the real tragedy of this story lives. Vanessa was 3 months older than Diana. She was sharp-minded and warm-hearted in equal measure, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and within 15 minutes make every person in it feel immediately understood. She had a gift for honesty that never felt cruel. She had a laugh that made strangers turn around in restaurants. She had been present for every single important moment of Diana's adult life. The night Diana got her nursing license, Vanessa was there with a bottle of wine and the kind of undisguised pride that only a person who truly loves you can manufacture. When Marcus proposed, it was Vanessa who Diana called first. During the difficult winter when Diana's father had a health scare and Diana could not find the words for how frightened she was, she sat in Vanessa's kitchen for 3 hours, talking and not talking, in the way that only people who have truly known each other can do without it being strange. Vanessa was Diana's person. That was the only way Diana ever described it. Not my best friend, not my girl, not my ride or die. Just, Vanessa is my person. Which, in the language of genuine intimacy, means something closer to she is the one I trust with the parts of myself I do not show anyone else. And that trust, built over 18 years, through college and careers and heartbreaks and celebrations and 1,000 ordinary Tuesdays, was the foundation beneath everything Diana believed about the life she was living. Which is why what Vanessa did not just break Diana's heart. It reorganized her entire understanding of reality. But we are not there yet. First, you need to understand the decision that put the distance between them. In the second year of Diana and Marcus's marriage, an opportunity arrived that changed everything. A hospital group in London was recruiting international nursing staff on specialized contracts. The pay was nearly double what Diana was earning in Charlotte. The contract was for 2 years, renewable once, meaning a maximum commitment of 4 years if everything went according to plan. The recruitment package included subsidized housing, flight allowances, and a completion bonus that, combined with what Diana projected she could save over the contract period, would allow them to pay off the Charlotte house entirely and give Marcus the capital he needed to grow his consulting business properly and permanently. This was the blueprint. This was the fastest direct route to everything on it. Diana sat with the idea for 6 weeks before she even brought it to Marcus. When she did bring it to him, they talked about it for another 6 weeks. Marcus had reservations. He was honest about that. He did not love the idea of the distance. He said so clearly and without pretending otherwise, which Diana appreciated because it told her he was taking it seriously and not just agreeing to whatever she wanted. But he also loved the blueprint. He loved the idea of the house paid off and the business properly funded and the future they had mapped out on that porch in the spring evening. And so after 6 weeks of real, difficult, honest conversation, they made the decision together. Sitting on that front porch in the quiet of a Charlotte evening, they agreed that Diana would go. Marcus said 2 years. Diana said maybe 3 if the renewal made sense. Marcus said she would come home every chance she got. Diana promised. Marcus said they would call every day, not every other day, every single day. Diana said I know, and she meant it with everything she had. She flew to London in September. Vanessa drove her to the airport. They hugged for a long time at the departure's entrance, the kind of hug you give someone when you are trying to fold enough love into it to last across an ocean. Vanessa cried. Diana managed not to, mostly because she knew that if she started she would not stop and she had a flight to catch. As she walked toward the gate and turned back one last time, she called out 4 words to Vanessa that she would spend years turning over in her mind. Take care of him. She meant, check in occasionally. Make sure he is eating well. Be the friend presence I cannot provide from 6,000 miles away. She meant it the way you mean something casual and kind when you love 2 people and you trust them both without question. She did not mean what it became. The first year in London was the hardest Diana had ever lived through. and she had been through hard years. She was tired in a way that went past the physical body and settled into something deeper, a kind of bone-level exhaustion that came not just from the double shifts and the 12-hour days and the patience and the paperwork, but from the specific grief of homesickness that nobody quite prepares you for when you are an adult who has chosen to be away. She missed Marcus with a physical ache that no video call could fully address. She missed Vanessa's voice in real time, the particular quality of a conversation that cannot be replicated through a screen no matter how clear the connection. She missed her front porch. She missed the particular sound Charlotte made on a Sunday morning. She missed the restaurant 2 streets from their house that made the best fried catfish she had ever eaten in her life. But she was building. That was the thing she held on to when the homesickness was at its worst. Every shift she worked, every dollar she earned, she transferred a portion directly into the joint account she and Marcus had set up specifically for the blueprint. She tracked every dollar. She had a spreadsheet, updated every Sunday morning over tea, the way another person might update a journal. Numbers were Diana's form of hope. They were the evidence that the sacrifice was compounding into something real. Marcus's business was growing slowly. He sent updates. She celebrated every single one with genuine enthusiasm, because his success was part of the plan, and the plan was theirs, and celebrating it felt like celebrating the future they were moving toward together. Vanessa called every Sunday, and sometimes on Wednesday evenings. She was funny and warm and present in exactly the way Diana needed. She talked about her own life, a relationship she was navigating, a career change she was considering, an apartment she was thinking about leaving. She asked about Diana's patients and Diana's shifts and Diana's colleagues. She sent 2 care packages over the course of the first year. The first contained hot sauce and 3 of Diana's favorite snacks that were nearly impossible to find in London. The second contained a novel Diana had mentioned wanting to read, tucked inside with a handwritten note that said, "For the woman building the future. Rest when you can." Diana kept that note on her bedside table for 2 full years. She looked at it on the mornings when the exhaustion was worst and let it do what it was meant to do. She had no idea that the woman who wrote it was already in the process of becoming someone she would not have recognized. In the second year, the calls with Marcus started to change. It was subtle enough at first that Diana filed it under the ordinary stress of long-distance marriage. They were both busy. The calls grew shorter. The conversations became, as she would later describe them, more logistical. How is the account? How is the business? How are your parents? Sleep well. I love you. A rhythm that felt functional rather than intimate, like a report between 2 colleagues managing a shared project rather than 2 people who had chosen each other as the center of their lives. Diana noticed it. She told herself it was temporary. She worked another shift. She transferred another payment. She updated the spreadsheet. But in the third year, something shifted that she could not categorize as easily. Marcus started mentioning Vanessa more in their conversations. Not in any alarming way. Not in any way that any single instance would cause a reasonable person to flag. But in accumulation. Over weeks and months, the mentions added up. Vanessa had come by to help when the furnace had issues. Vanessa had recommended a contractor for the bathroom renovation Diana had been planning to do when she got home. Vanessa had been over for dinner the previous weekend with a few of Marcus's friends. Small things, normal things, on their own. But Diana was a nurse, and nurses learn to read accumulation the way other people read single data points. She paid attention to those mentions the way she paid attention to a patient's vitals that were still technically within the normal range, but trending in a direction she did not like. Nothing to act on, but something to watch. She called Vanessa and brought it up casually, almost as a joke. Vanessa laughed. She said Marcus was just lonely, and they were all keeping each other company. She said Diana should not worry about a thing. She said the 3 of them were family, and that was what family did. They showed up for each other. Diana believed her. She wanted to believe her. She also, quietly, without telling anyone, began documenting. Not because she had confirmed suspicion, not because she had a specific accusation forming in her mind, but because she was a planner, and planners pay attention to data even when the data is uncomfortable, and something in the aggregate of the last several months had produced a number that she could not reconcile, and she had learned long ago never to ignore a number that does not make sense just because you wish it would. In the middle of her third year, Diana's hospital offered her a leadership position, senior nursing coordinator, overseeing 14 staff members across 2 wards. The pay increase was significant. The schedule became more structured. And critically, the hospital had revised its retention incentive, which meant that the completion bonus at the end of Diana's full contract had been adjusted upward to a number that, combined with her savings, would be enough to pay the Charlotte house off in full and leave a meaningful amount remaining. She called Marcus to share the news. He said congratulations. He asked about the schedule changes. And then, in a way that Diana would only fully understand much later, he seemed particularly focused on one specific piece of information: when she would be coming home, whether the contract end date was fixed or whether it might move earlier. She told him it was fixed, approximately 7 months away. He said that was fine. The call lasted 11 minutes. She updated the spreadsheet. She did not know, sitting in her London apartment with her tea going cold beside her laptop, that the call had mattered to Marcus for reasons that had nothing at all to do with celebrating her promotion. She did not know that in that 11-minute call she had handed him a timeline, and that he had already been working with that timeline for longer than she realized. What happened over the following months would not become clear to Diana in real time. It would become clear later, in the brutal, specific clarity that only comes from documented evidence and a forensic accountant who has been paid to find the truth and has found it. But in those months, while Diana coordinated her 14 staff members across 2 London wards and updated her spreadsheet every Sunday morning and told herself she was 7 months from the finish line, a series of decisions were being made in Charlotte, in her house, in her marriage, that were quietly dismantling everything she had spent 3 years building. The first decision was financial. Marcus had discovered, at some point during Diana's absence, that the mortgage payments Diana had been making consistently from London had built significant equity in the Charlotte property. Equity that was accessible through a home equity line of credit attached to the house. Over a period of approximately 8 months, he made a series of withdrawals from that line, not large enough individually to seem alarming on any single statement. Collectively, they totaled slightly over $41,000. Diana did not know about the withdrawals. She had not been consulted. She had not been informed. The account existed in both their names, and he had accessed it alone, repeatedly, while she was working double shifts to build the equity that he was removing. The second decision was structural, and it had been made so gradually that by the time it was complete it had the appearance of something that had always been true. Vanessa Cole, Diana's person, her best friend of 17 years, the woman who had cried at the departures terminal when Diana's flight was called, had stopped being a visitor to the Charlotte house and had become a resident of it. This had not happened overnight. It had not been announced. It had not been communicated to Diana in any form. It had been a slow accumulation, a piece of clothing left behind, a toothbrush added to the bathroom, keys made, a parking space claimed, a household gradually reorganizing itself around 2 people instead of 1. Until 18 months had passed and Vanessa's presence in Diana's house was so normalized that nobody inside it was examining it carefully anymore, including Vanessa. There was a second coffee mug on the rack, a brand of herbal tea in the cabinet that Diana had never bought and Marcus did not drink, but Vanessa had been drinking since college. A grocery list on the refrigerator in handwriting that was not Marcus's. A small succulent plant on the kitchen windowsill that had been growing there long enough to have developed new growth on 2 separate stems. And a new keypad code on the front door. The code that Diana had used for 3 years, the code she had typed in from memory 100 times during visits home on her contract breaks, had been changed. Nobody had told her. The third decision was the one that revealed the full architecture of what had been happening. 14 months before Diana was scheduled to come home, Marcus had sat down with a family law attorney in Charlotte and had a preliminary consultation about divorce. Not a casual inquiry. A strategic conversation about asset division, specifically about a property whose equity had been built primarily by one spouse's overseas income, specifically about timing, specifically about the conditions under which filing might produce the most favorable outcome for the spouse who remained in the country and the property, while the other spouse was 6,000 miles away and unable to respond immediately. He had been advised. He had been planning. And the plan had a timeline, which was why that 11-minute phone call had mattered so much. He now knew exactly how long he had to finish getting the pieces into place. Diana did not know any of this, but she was about to find out. The thing that changed Diana's timeline was not a single dramatic revelation. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October when she called Marcus, and the call went to voicemail. She called Vanessa, and the call went to voicemail. She tried Marcus again, and this time it rang through. And something in the particular quality of how he answered, slightly breathless, slightly too casual, slightly in the way of a man who had been somewhere he would rather not account for, and was now performing ordinary life, made everything she had been filing under watchfulness for months crystallize into something sharper and clearer and impossible to ignore. She trusted that feeling the same way she trusted her clinical instinct, the same way she trusted the moment a patient's chart moved from concerning to critical before the rest of the room had noticed. She did not explain the feeling to herself. She did not argue with it. She opened her laptop and booked a flight home for the following Thursday. She told no one she was coming. She kept working her shifts through the week. She finished her Sunday spreadsheet update. She replied to 3 work emails, watered the small plant on her London windowsill, and packed her bags over 2 evenings with the same careful, efficient precision she brought to everything she did. On Thursday morning, she took a car to Heathrow Airport in the early gray light of a London dawn and checked in at the departures desk and found her seat and watched England disappear beneath the clouds. And somewhere over the Atlantic she sat in the particular silence of a woman who has made a decision and is moving toward its consequences and has chosen to be ready for whatever they are. She landed in Charlotte at 6:47 in the evening, Eastern Time. The air hit her as she stepped out of the terminal, cold and November sharp in the way that Charlotte only gets in the last weeks of autumn, and she stood on the arrival's curb for a moment with her rolling suitcase beside her and breathed it in. This city, her city, the place she had been wiring money back to for 3 years, the place she had been aching for in the small hours of London mornings, the place whose particular sound and smell and weight she had carried inside her like a second heartbeat across the ocean. She was back, and she felt, pulling her coat tighter and stepping toward the rideshare line, a complicated mixture of love for this place and a cold preparatory calm that she recognized as the feeling she got before a difficult procedure. Not fear. Focus. The drive from the airport to the house took 22 minutes. Diana had taken this exact drive hundreds of times in her life. She knew every gas station and fast food sign along the route. She knew the particular way the Charlotte skyline sat against the November sky, small enough to be modest and lit enough to be beautiful. She watched it all pass through the car window in silence, her hands resting still in her lap, her carry-on bag beside her on the seat, her rolling suitcase in the trunk. The driver said nothing, and she was grateful for it. She was using those 22 minutes to prepare, not to rehearse lines or plan arguments or think about what she would say, just to settle into the clarity that had brought her here, to make sure it was still there, to make sure she was still the version of herself who could walk through whatever door was about to open and not flinch. The car turned onto her street. The house appeared ahead on the left, exactly as she had last seen it. The red brick colonial with the white trim and the wide covered porch and the 4 white columns and the front porch light burning warm amber against the November dark. Both the porch light and the living room light were on. 2 cars sat in the driveway. One she recognized immediately as Marcus's. The second she did not recognize at all. It was parked slightly to the side, not in the way a guest parks, tentatively and temporarily, but in the way a regular parks, with the casual certainty of someone who knows exactly where their car belongs. Diana noticed this detail. She filed it. She paid the driver, stepped out of the car, and pulled her rolling suitcase up the front walkway toward the door she had paid for from across an ocean. She reached the keypad and entered the code she had used for 3 years without thinking. The keypad beeped twice. Denied. She stood there for a moment with her hand still raised, processing the specific information that 2 beeps and a red light communicated. The code had been changed. The code to her own front door. Changed without her knowledge, without her consent, without even a casual mention in any of the hundreds of phone calls and video chats she had shared with Marcus over the course of the year. Changed long enough ago that whoever changed it had stopped thinking about the fact that the woman whose name was on the mortgage did not have the new one. She lowered her hand. She rang the doorbell. From inside, she heard movement. A voice she could not quite make out. Footsteps on hardwood, moving closer. The door opened, and Diana Mercer stood face to face with Vanessa Cole. Vanessa was barefoot. She was wearing a loose, oversized button-down shirt that Diana recognized after a moment as one of Marcus's. Her hair was down and loose. The way you wear your hair when you are at home, when you are not going anywhere, when you are settled into a space that belongs to you. She looked like a woman in her own house. She looked like a woman who was comfortable and at ease and had every reason to be, until the person she was opening the door to registered in her mind, and three expressions crossed her face in the space of approximately 2 seconds. The first was recognition. The second was something close to terror. The third was a deliberate, controlled settling, a composure that came from somewhere practiced and prepared, the expression of a woman who had thought about this possibility and was now activating whatever she had decided she would do if it ever arrived. She said one word. Diana's name. Diana said one word back. Vanessa's name. There was a pause. And then Vanessa said 2 words that contained an entire catastrophe. You're early. Not, oh my God, you're home. Not, Diana, what are you doing here? Not, this is not what you think it is. You're early. 2 words that assumed a scheduled arrival. 2 words that revealed, in the assumption they contained, that the situation on the other side of this door had been normalized to the point where the only thing remarkable about Diana's presence was the timing of it. Diana absorbed those 2 words. She picked up her suitcase. She walked into her house. The living room had been rearranged. The couch she and Marcus had chosen together from a furniture store 2 months before she left for London was still there, but it had been moved, repositioned against a different wall. There was a new rug she had not chosen, a pattern she did not recognize. Throw pillows in colors she would never have selected. On the coffee table, 2 glasses of wine and a face-down phone that was not Marcus's, placed the way you place a phone when you do not want the screen to be visible to whoever might walk through the door. On the wall where a framed print had been, a print Diana had brought back from a weekend in Savannah with Marcus in the first year of their marriage, there was now a different piece of art. Abstract. Nicely chosen. Chosen with taste. Chosen by someone who had been living here long enough to put her taste on the walls. Diana walked through the living room and into the kitchen. The kitchen told the same story in greater detail. A second coffee mug hanging from the mug rack. A box of herbal tea in the cabinet that Diana had never bought and Marcus had never drunk, but Vanessa had been drinking since their college days. A grocery list on the refrigerator in a handwriting that was not Marcus's. A small succulent plant on the windowsill that had been growing there long enough to have pushed out new leaves. Diana knew with absolute certainty that she had not bought that plant. She turned. Vanessa was standing in the kitchen doorway watching her, and her expression had moved past composure into something that was trying very hard to be neutral. Diana asked how long. Vanessa did not pretend to misunderstand the question. Vanessa started to say Diana's name in the tone of someone buying time, and Diana asked again. Specifically, how long have you been living in this house, Vanessa? Vanessa looked at the floor. Then she looked up. She said about 1.5 years. Diana received that number with the stillness of a woman who has decided not to perform her reaction for an audience. 1.5 years. 18 months. She had been in London working 12-hour shifts, updating her blueprint spreadsheet, wiring money home every single month, and for 18 of those months, her best friend of 17 years had been living in the house that Diana's salary was paying for. She asked where Marcus was. Vanessa said he had gone to pick up food and would be back soon, and could they please just sit down and talk? Diana said yes. She said sit down, and she said it the way she addressed junior nurses when a situation needed to be managed rather than escalated. Vanessa sat. What followed over the next 40 minutes, before Marcus returned, was a conversation that Diana would later describe as the most painful and also the most clarifying of her life. Not because Vanessa told her everything. She did not. But because the specific shape of what Vanessa said and the specific shape of what she did not say gave Diana a structural map of the situation that was more useful than any amount of emotional confrontation would have been. Vanessa was, in her own way, honest. She said it had started slowly. She said that after Diana left, Marcus had struggled more than he admitted to Diana, that the loneliness had been real and persistent, that the calls had become difficult for him in ways he did not know how to express. She said she had been coming by more and more often, and that over many months something had shifted. She used the word gradually several times. Diana noticed this. Gradually is the word people choose when they want to describe a choice as something that happened to them rather than something they made. And then Vanessa said something that changed the shape of the conversation entirely. She said Marcus had told her, somewhere in the first year, that he did not believe Diana was coming home permanently, that he had come to believe Diana had found a life in London that she preferred to the one in Charlotte, that the marriage, in his assessment, was already finished in practice even if it had not yet been finished on paper. Diana looked at Vanessa very carefully. She asked, "Did he say this before or after you moved in?" Vanessa paused for a long time. She said, "Before." Diana said, "So he told you our marriage was over, and that was when you made yourself at home in my house?" Vanessa did not answer that directly. She said, "I know how it looks." Diana said, "Tell me how it actually is." Vanessa said, "I love him." Diana sat with those 3 words for a long moment. She had loved Vanessa Cole for 18 years. She had loved her unconditionally through everything. And Vanessa had sat across from her in Diana's own kitchen and said she loved the man Diana had married. Then there was a sound at the front door, and Marcus was home. He came in carrying a large paper bag from a Thai restaurant that Diana had always loved, and as he turned from the front door and saw his wife standing in his kitchen, his face did something Diana had not anticipated. He looked relieved, not guilty, not panicked, relieved, in the way a man looks when something he has been dreading for a long time has finally arrived and the period of waiting, which is its own particular kind of suffering, is over. He set the bag on the counter. He asked how long she had been there. She said long enough. He glanced at Vanessa, and Vanessa gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod that told Diana everything she needed to know about how fluent their nonverbal communication had become. He pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Diana stood. Vanessa stayed in the doorway. Marcus looked at his wife and said they needed to talk. Diana said yes. They did. Over the next hour, Marcus said the things Diana had anticipated and the things she had not. He said the distance had been harder than he ever admitted. He said the calls had felt logistical and he had felt like a project manager rather than a partner. He said he had felt invisible inside a marriage that was being managed across an ocean rather than lived in a shared space. He said he knew how that sounded from the person who had stayed home, and he was not trying to make Diana the villain, but he needed her to understand that his emotional experience over those 3 years had been real and difficult and lonely. Diana listened without interrupting. She was taking notes in the part of her mind that had been taking notes for months. And then Marcus said the things she had not expected. He told her that 14 months ago, he had spoken to a family law attorney about divorce. He told her he had been planning to file before Diana's contract ended. He told her the plan had been to initiate the paperwork before she came back, so that the terms could be established in advance and the process structured in a way that would be more complex for a spouse who was out of the country and unable to respond immediately. Diana asked him to explain what he meant by terms established in advance. He looked at the table. She asked again, her voice completely level. He told her about the home equity line of credit. $41,000 withdrawn over 8 months. He said it was for business expenses. He said the business had needed capital. Diana asked, "Was I consulted about this?" He said he had not wanted to worry her. She said, "That is not an answer to the question I asked." He said, "No, you were not consulted." There was a silence in that kitchen that was not empty but full. Full of 3 years and $41,000 and a keypad code she had not been given and a best friend in a man's shirt and a lawyer Diana had never been told about. Full of every Sunday she had spent updating a spreadsheet she had believed in. Full of every dollar she had wired home. Diana reached into her carry-on bag and removed a folder. She placed it on the kitchen table in front of Marcus. He looked at it without touching it. She told him that 6 months ago she had become concerned about the Blueprint account. The growth trajectory had flattened in a way she could not explain based on the expenses they had discussed. She had hired a financial analyst in Charlotte to conduct a forensic review of their joint accounts. The analysis had identified the home equity withdrawals. It had also identified 2 additional transfers she had not authorized, made from a joint savings account they had opened in the first year of their marriage, totaling approximately $17,000, moved to a personal account she had no information on. All of it was documented. Her attorney in Charlotte had held copies for a week. She had not notified anyone because she had wanted to have the conversation in person, in this house, because this house was where every one of those decisions had been made. Marcus stared at the folder. And then Vanessa spoke from the doorway. She said, "There is something he has not told you." Marcus turned to look at her sharply. Vanessa met his eyes and then looked at Diana and said, "The account those transfers went to. It is not mine." I did not know about those transfers. He told me the business account was absorbing some capital. He never showed me numbers. Diana looked at Vanessa. She looked at Marcus. She asked whose account. He said nothing. She asked again. He said, "It is complicated." 3 words. The words of a man who has been managing several simultaneous situations and has finally run out of road between them. The account, as Diana's attorney and the financial analyst would establish over the following days, belonged to a third party. A woman Marcus had been involved with for approximately 20 months, someone he had met through a professional network, a relationship that had not been disclosed to Diana or, as it turned out, to Vanessa either. $17,000 from the marital savings account had been transferred to this woman over the course of 11 months. There was not one secret inside this house. There were 3. And when the full shape of all 3 became clear, it reorganized everything. Vanessa was no longer simply the woman who had moved into Diana's house and fallen in love with her husband. She was also a woman who had been deceived. She had been told a story about a marriage that was already over, told it convincingly enough that she had believed it, acted on it, built a life around it, without knowing that the man telling her that story had been keeping a third woman entirely off the canvas that both of them could see. Vanessa sat down at the kitchen table and did not speak for a long time. When she finally did, she looked at Diana with an expression that Diana would later describe as the first completely honest thing she had seen on any face since she walked through the door. Vanessa said, "I am so sorry." Diana said, "I believe you." Vanessa said that was more than she deserved. Diana said probably, but it was what she had to give right now. Marcus said he could explain the account. Diana said his attorney could explain it to her attorney. She stood. She picked up her carry-on bag. She looked at Marcus and told him she wanted him out of the house by Sunday. She would stay in a hotel until then, and her attorney would be in contact. Marcus started to say she could not simply, and Diana finished his sentence for him by telling him exactly what she could do. This house was purchased with her income and her credit history and her 3 years of double shifts in a country that was not hers. She had documentation of every dollar she had contributed to the mortgage and every dollar that had been removed from accounts she had funded without her authorization. He was welcome to contest any of it in court. She was fully prepared for that. He said nothing. She looked at Vanessa and told her she would need a written statement covering everything Marcus had told her about the marriage, including the timeline of when he said it was over and what he had said about Diana's plans to return. Vanessa said she would give her everything. Diana said she knew she would. She picked up her suitcase and walked out of the kitchen, through the living room with the rearranged furniture and the unfamiliar rug and the art that someone else had chosen, past the front door with the code that had been changed without her knowledge, and out onto the porch of the house she had paid for from across an ocean. She stood there in the cold November air. Charlotte was quiet around her. The neighborhood was doing what it did at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening, living its ordinary life, entirely unaware. She called a hotel. She booked a room for 3 nights. She was home. The legal process that followed was long and complicated and neither clean nor easy. Diana's attorney, a woman named Patricia who had practiced family law in Charlotte for 22 years and who would later tell a colleague that Diana Mercer was among the most prepared clients she had ever encountered, filed for divorce 11 days after Diana's return. The forensic documentation Diana had been quietly assembling for 6 months was extraordinary in its completeness. The $41,000 from the home equity line was traced in full. The $17,000 directed to the third-party account was harder, but traceable, and Patricia traced it. The 3 years of wire transfers from London, every mortgage payment with Diana's name attached to its origin, every home improvement expense, every contribution to the blueprint account, created a financial picture so complete and so clear that Marcus's attorney, in a preliminary meeting with Patricia, used the phrase overwhelmingly documented situation not once, but multiple times. Diana had not simply been thorough. She had been, in the specific language of someone who had been professionally outmaneuvered, remarkably thorough. The house was awarded to Diana in the settlement. The equity line debt was assigned to Marcus along with a structured obligation to repay the $17,000. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday afternoon in March, 5 months after Diana had stood on her front porch in the November cold and called a hotel. She sat in Patricia's office afterward and drank a glass of water and was quiet for a while. Patricia asked her how she was feeling. Diana said she was not sure yet. Patricia said that was exactly the right answer. Vanessa gave the written statement. She gave it fully, without minimizing, and it was instrumental to the financial case. She attempted contact with Diana twice in the months that followed. The first time Diana did not respond. The second time she sent a short, measured reply saying she wished Vanessa well and was not yet ready for further contact. She was honest about what she was not ready for. She was no less honest about what she was. What Diana did in the year that followed the divorce finalization was not dramatic, and it was not loud, and it was not the kind of story that makes headlines. But it is the part of this story that matters most. She repainted the living room. She chose a deep, warm terracotta that she had admired in a magazine for years and never felt quite bold enough to commit to when she was making decisions with someone else. She sold the repositioned couch and the new rug and the unfamiliar throw pillows and replaced them with furniture she had chosen alone, entirely alone, because she wanted it and for no other reason. She planted white peace lilies along the front walkway, pressed the roots into the dark soil with her own hands on a morning when the light was still early and the neighborhood was still quiet. She enrolled in a graduate nursing leadership program she had been postponing for 2 years. She started running in the mornings, not because anyone suggested it, but because she discovered that the particular quiet of Charlotte at 6 in the morning was something she wanted to be inside. She called her mother more. She spent a Saturday helping her younger sister repaint a bathroom and ate terrible pizza afterward and laughed until her face hurt. She was not fine immediately. It would be dishonest to say she was. There were nights when the full weight of what had happened landed on her with a physical pressure that was almost impossible to carry. There were mornings she moved through the early hours on pure automated routine because genuine feeling had to wait until the shift was over. There were moments when the grief of losing Vanessa hit her harder than anything related to Marcus, because the end of a marriage, however devastating, exists within a framework of possibility that everyone who has ever been married understands. But the loss of a friendship that had been built over 18 years, a friendship she had believed was one of the fixed and permanent structures of her life, had no framework. Its absence left a shape in the space around her that she kept bumping into, quietly and unexpectedly, for a long time. But she moved forward. She moved forward with the same methodical, patient, deeply stubborn momentum that had gotten her through nursing school and through 3 years in London and through a Thursday night in November when she came home early and found her life rearranged by people she had trusted completely. She moved forward the way she had always moved forward, by paying attention to the data, by tracking what was real, by trusting the numbers and the documents and the spreadsheet, and most of all the quiet voice inside her that had known something was wrong before she was ready to name it. About a year after the divorce was finalized, Diana sat down for a podcast interview. The host asked her what she would say to a woman currently in a similar situation, working hard for a shared future from far away, trusting completely, sending the money and making the calls, and believing that sacrifice and love are the same language. Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I would tell her to pay attention to the data, not because she should live in suspicion, but because love and trust are not the same thing as willful blindness. I would tell her that she is allowed to protect herself while she is also loving someone. I would tell her that the spreadsheet is not unromantic. The spreadsheet is how you know what is real. The host asked whether Diana regretted going abroad. She said no. The host asked whether she regretted trusting them. She said, I regret not trusting myself sooner. I noticed things for months before I came home. I filed them under explanations instead of evidence. The data was there. I just was not ready to read it yet. The host asked whether she was happy now. Diana was quiet again. Then she said, I am something better than happy. I am clear. And for a long time I did not know the difference. Now I do. There is a front porch on a house in Charlotte, North Carolina, that belongs entirely to one woman. In the mornings, when the city is still warming up and the white peace lilies along the front walkway are catching the early light, she sits there with a cup of coffee and her phone and sometimes her laptop if she has work to move through before the day fully begins. The house is hers. The morning is hers. The life she is building inside both of them is hers. She came home early. She found betrayal in the place where she had built love. She found the code to her own front door had been changed. She found her best friend of 17 years standing in her doorway wearing her husband's shirt. She found $41,000 missing and a lawyer she had never been told about in a third relationship she had never been given the chance to know existed. She found all of it, and she did not let it be the end of her story. She let it be, instead, the beginning of the one she had actually been meant to live. The one with only her name on the blueprint. The one she was writing still. Now I want to hear from you. At what point in this story did you first feel something was wrong? Was it the shortening phone calls? The growing mentions of Vanessa? Or did it take the red keypad to make it real for you? Drop your answer in the comments below. And let me ask you one more thing before you go. The question that I think sits at the heart of everything Diana's story reveals. If you were 6,000 miles from home, trusting the people you loved most with your money, your house, and your future, would you have caught it? Or would you have done what most of us would have done, believed what we were told by the people we had always believed, and kept updating the spreadsheet and telling ourselves it was temporary? Think about that. Leave your thoughts below. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe.